Welcome to the Association 4.0 podcast, your association's no-fluff playbook to navigating and thriving in Industry 4.0 or the digital marketplace. Each week, we bring expert insights to help you and your association stay ahead of the curve.
All right, welcome to the Association 4.0 podcast, where we explore the future of associations, innovation, and digital transformation. I am your host, Sherry Budziak, and today we're diving deep into the world of artificial intelligence and its impact on associations. So as we all know, AI is transforming the way that organizations manage information, engage with members, and leverage their data for strategic advantage. But with great power comes great complexity. So how do associations harness AI effectively while navigating challenges with misinformation, ethical concerns, and evolving technology? So today, to help us break this all down, I am thrilled to welcome Kelly Lakas, CEO and founder of Onyx Systems, and Chris Hinrichs, PhD, CTO, and co-founder of Onyx Systems. So their company specializes in AI-driven solutions designed to make associations more accessible, usable, and impactful. So Kelly and Chris, welcome to the Association 4.0 podcast.
Thank you for having us. We're super excited.
Thank you, Sherry.
Great.
Glad to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. Before we dive into AI and its impact on associations, I'd love for our listeners to get to know you both a little bit better. And so, Kelly, let's start with you. You've got an impressive background leading large-scale projects at Fortune 500 companies and now helping associations leverage AI. So what inspired you to co-found Onyx Systems and focus on the association space?
It was family, actually, that drew me to associations, specifically my husband. He has been in the association space. He's been an association exec and association technology leader for over 20 years. So watching him and his organizations, and they work miracles with limited budgets and limited people, and their missions are there to truly help and serve people in industries, other nonprofits. They're there to help, and they're trying to improve industries, efficiencies, output, and productivity. And those research organizations, they drive the future of it, right? With their support of the research. I've been in software development as a project manager since the .com boom, which is crazy. And now we're sort of riding the wave of the AI boom, and it's deja vu, but it's nice to be on the leading edge of the wave this time for associations. I'm a problem-solving PM by trade, project manager, and I'm there to remove our obstacles for our project team and making sure that the technology delivers business value. And so that's what I see at this time that associations are looking for with regards to AI. Uncertain times that we have right now, it's good to have somebody who's going to dig in and work with the associations, be a partner, and make sure that their solutions for AI are not just, hey, it's cool we have AI, but they're delivering the business value that they need and it meets the challenges that associations face.
So that is great. And AI can be complex, but we're really focused on making it accessible for associations. You're talking about limited budgets and things like that. So I'm really excited to talk to you more about that today. Chris, you have really deep expertise in machine learning, from healthcare prognostics to self-driving cars, which is really cool. So what drew you to developing an AI solution for associations?
In my case, a connection is also Kelly's husband, who is one of my closest friends from my days in undergrad. We've known each other, I think, for over 25 years now, starting as we all worked at an undergrad job when we were in college, and we were part of this huge friend group, and we've just kind of kept in touch. And Kelly's husband, Mike, has been wanting to do something with me for quite a while now. And I think this is the first opportunity that really made sense that my expertise would work here. And it was a use case that is exciting to all of us. And we think that we can really deliver a lot of value.
That's great. Let's talk a little bit about one of the challenges with AI, especially, with large language models, which, everybody talks to me or is worried about hallucinations, right? Where AI generates inaccurate or misleading information. So Chris, Can you explain why AI systems or, why AI does this and what we should be thinking about?
Yeah. So every time people say hallucination, I'm reminded of this comment by Jeffrey Hinton that technically what they're doing is actually confabulation. So hallucination is where you have a sensory input that you perceive that wasn't there. And a confabulation is where you make up a story that never happened. And so I think language models actually do a little bit of both. The short answer or the high level answer to why they do that is that what they are is a sentence, they're plausible sentence generating machine. So if you have a question that you don't know the answer to, then that means that there's more than one sentence that could be the answer. It could sound right, and you need to know which one. But the language models only give sentences that sound right because sounding right just means that they occur more frequently, and that's what they do. Sentences that sound right occur more frequently, and it's really kind of this magic to see that it works. I saw the same kind of magic when I was in grad school working with Alzheimer's disease. And so I would just take brain scans and do machine learning on it. And the model would kind of figure out what parts of the brain best predicted Alzheimer's disease. And I'd show it to the clinicians and they would say, yeah, that's exactly what we expected to see. Those are the right brain regions. And really, it's kind of this weird magic where if you correctly predict the data that's there, and if you do it in a way that works out of sample, then you probably are picking up on real regularities that are there. So it seems like intelligence, but underneath it's actually doing something much simpler. It's just giving you back things that are frequently occurring, just like Clever Hans the horse, just much more complex.
I always kind of use a scenario of like, okay, what comes after knock knock?
Sorry. Oh yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah. What? Yeah. Who's there?
Yeah. Who's there? And then, right. And then what's the next? So because my mom was saying the other day too, it's funny that you said she's in her 70s and she said, I don't know, it's just like magic. I'm like, well, it seems like magic. It's not really magic, but it's kind of cool, like magic. Talk to me a little bit more about, I don't know, I'm really interested in this whole identifying problems with like MRIs and PET scans and things like that. Knowing that work that you did, and I guess, how are you kind of applying this to kind of the actual world that we're living in today and maybe, with associations?
I guess the journey there is, when you start in machine learning, there are a lot of equations and a lot of math, and then it kind of makes sense in a very abstract way. And then you kind of get in this mindset where there's only a score. You're trying to get a high score on something. It's very abstract. It's kind of like, just software development. The really cool thing about working with clinicians in grad school is that it kind of got me out of that mindset of trying to get a high score on this thing or finding a clever equation. And I could start to see that, these are real people. I had one case where there were a few of the examples where it was really hard for the model to correctly classify them. And I showed the brain scans to the clinician, and the clinician said, wow, these study patients may not actually be healthy controls. And then he brought it up with their PI and said they may actually have early signs of Alzheimer's. When you work closely with domain experts, you begin to realize that there's a whole lot of things going on in the world that isn't reflected in that really basic setup that they give you. Here's the data, here's the label, correctly predict them. My first job in Silicon Valley, I worked in IVF prognostics. And so we would take patient data, we would just predict what's the probability of success of having a live baby if this patient does IVF. And the product is we'd give a report to them. And in some clinics, I would find that if a certain important variable was missing, then all of a sudden the chances were really good. And this actually carried through into the data. Like it actually was a good, and it was kind of dominating the whole model. And so it turned out that there was a doctor at that clinic who was only prescribing the test that would give us that variable in cases where she had a doubt about basically if the prognostic wasn't already good. So her judgment was getting into the data, and then we had to figure out a way to train the model so that it wouldn't rely on that because the model is supposed to predict. So I've just always loved getting out of the textbook classroom definition of AI and looking for how these things impact people. And so now here we are with these complex language models. And now the state of the art is people have math exams and they try to get these high scores on the math exams. And they're doing the same thing that it's just, you get drawn into this cycle where like, I got to get a high score on the math exam. But for me, the real excitement is let's just see how it actually helps people. And so we have a product that lets you search through a huge document a repository. The key thing here is it doesn't try to answer the question that you have. It tries to find the answer. I've found that just changing it in this one small way has a hugely beneficial effect. Don't try to answer the question, try to find the answer in the data. It's probably my favorite aspect of working in this space.
That's really cool. I always say, I'm like, are you asking the right question? So Kelly, I'm also hearing debates from people about AI generated content being censored or biased. So what are your thoughts about that? And what should association leaders think about when implementing these tools when it comes to biases and things like that?
With the bias, these are developed by people. These are machine models, but they have developed on people. So you have to be aware of that. One of the things that we actually ran into in one of our demo instance that we were working on is we put in, it's a gardening basis, and it's there for us to just practice and enhance our model. Chris typed in something that was HOE for a, like a backhoe type of thing. And the LLM was like, oh, I can't answer that now because it considered it to be inappropriate slang. And we were like,
interesting.
Oh. We were like, it's a bit spicy, the gardening. But then it hit us, like if we worked with a medical association, or if a medical association started using it, or a nonprofit that maybe deals with homelessness or domestic violence, there's some things it might censor. So you have to kind of be aware of that. I'm glad that we have Chris as part of our team and part of our co-founder, because he can actually see that and understand it and work with the LM to change it. There's definitely there, especially if you're using a commercially available model, you have to be aware of some of the limitations about that. When you go back to hallucinations, I like to always say, he was saying that whatever is the most frequent type of thing sometimes is underneath. And my favorite one was with Gemini, which is Google's AI, when it came out and somebody asked how to keep cheese on the pizza. And it said, we'll use Elmer's glue. And it's because it was yeah. And that was because it was reading it from Reddit. It was a humor post on a humor subreddit, but it had lots of likes and had a lot of traction. So I was like, oh, this must be a good answer. And then tying it back to what Chris is saying, because our work ties back to a citation and a reference, and he's finding the answer. He's not just trying to answer the question, but find it first. We reduce that. That's one of the ways we can kind of keep the transparency. You're not going to be able to avoid all the censoring, but we are able to work around it and be able to provide the references that they need, and where it's coming from. So it's not just a guess and it's not just coming out of there.
I had not heard that the pizza and Elmer's glue.
It was a big drama when it came out, because when Google was very embarrassed and they had to race and update and tweak their responses, because the humor Reddits are very popular. And yeah, it was pretty like on the little AI thing on the top, it was like, yeah, use Elmer's glue. And people like,
that's a good one. So, Kelly, I've been through, and you have too, a lot of different transitions when it comes to technology, right? And new technology. And I can remember back in the day, associations were fearful of the internet and social media and e-commerce and the cloud. And what do you mean, Sherry? We're going to put our content, our information where? And we're at that cusp again, but I think there's a lot of skepticism, right? What do you see as kind of the pattern with AI, and why it's actually crucial for associations to embrace this now rather than waiting? Because I think, in my career, there was time, and I keep telling people today, like, we don't have the time. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
Well, like I mentioned at the beginning, the dot-com boom, right? Every business had a website. You didn't know what you were going to do with that website. But I'm like, hey, it was very much, we're going to have a website and something's going to happen, right? They didn't know how they were money or create value. And now you can't live without it, right? Like everything's a website. You're logging in for applying to jobs and your bank and credit card and everything, right? And people who realize that on the early part out of it, Amazon was just selling books and now it's huge. Google was just searching and making ads, which is actually really more of their innovation, really targeted ads. And they were able to grow with this, and they're huge, right? So AI is kind of around that hype cycle, which I've just learned about that, like hype cycle, the Gartner hype cycle graph. And we're seeing AI do the same. If you're as an association, you're getting in before all this hype started, you are showing that you're innovative and you're providing an innovative service to your members. And it's not just a chatbot, right? I was actually talking to someone of some market research the other day, and they were like, she was complaining about the AI chatbot. It just gives me canned responses. So you don't want to just give canned responses, the same old that are going to come from maybe just a drop-in like solution. You want to have something that's going to provide value to your members. And what provides value is simplifying the access to that data. And it helps them get answers quickly. It's not just a search, it's getting the answers. And the LLMs and AI do that really, really well. And we were actually talking internally in our team, in our company, and we were like, in 5 years, it's most likely that every big data repository is going to have some sort of LLM and AI in front of it. Chris is nodding his head, and yeah, it's because they're the best way to get information out, and associations have a lot of good data.
Yeah, definitely. I think a huge opportunity. A lot of people are looking at this as like disruptive technology, but always behind it is a lot of opportunity. So, Chris, tell me from a technical standpoint, what are the risks of not leveraging AI in association management?
As Kelly pointed out, there's a kind of a boom going on, and nobody quite knows how it's going to shake out. I don't think it's quite as bad as it would have been for Kodak film in the early aughts when digital cameras came around. So nobody's going to go out of business. It's nothing like that. Nothing is getting replaced. It's more a question of opportunity costs. There are some really great opportunities, and if you don't act on them, then your other competitors will act on them and they'll get an advantage, but it's not like a make or break kind of thing. The way I look at it as a kind of a newcomer to this space, what are associations and professional organizations? They're a way of providing value for their members. That includes public advocacy, disseminating technical results and things like that, but they also provide a lot of value directly to their members. And so one of the first most direct way we can do that is by making these huge repositories of information that they have accessible to their members. They also do a lot of educational outreach. I think that there's a lot of opportunities for AI to be a part of how they develop talent and educate the next generation in their respective fields. The one thing that you can be sure of is that the core technologies will continue to develop. So, think about like the way websites looked in the Netscape navigators time versus the way they looked in 2008 versus the way they are now. Now they're very dynamic, they're very interactive. A lot of things happen behind the scenes. At first they were very static. So I think AI, language models and AI is going to kind of develop like that as well. So people are now using what's called agentic AI, which is where the model generates some text and then another program looks at that and interprets it and then does something. It might make a reservation or something, or it might order a refill of whatever it is you can do on the internet with your browser. The risk of not taking advantage of that would be simply that your competitors are going to be able to automate a lot of these processes and just move a lot faster than you can. But no matter how clever the models get, no matter how much they advance, no matter how good the reasoning is, there's one fact is going to always remain, is that these organizations are sitting on these repositories of data that's not in the public training data sets. And the fact that they're not in the public training data sets is a huge deal. It's because that's one of the ways that the orgs drive revenue, but that's also part of why the organizations exist. Among other things, they're there to curate and safeguard that information. So they by owning it, they make sure that they're responsible for it, that it's reliable. And we're finding now that one of the reasons that the model, like Kelly said with this Reddit post, the models are training on the whole internet. They don't know Reddit from Elsevier. And these organizations have high quality data. And it's now becoming very clear that if you have that high quality information, you could train it to be a better model. But if you do that, then it'll be part of the model and there'll be nobody to curate it anymore. So I think the better way is for organizations to keep that data and be responsible for it and own it, and then they control access. And so I think the way we can do this is by having AI that's not trained on it, at least not in a way that updates the weights of the model permanently, but instead controls access to it. That could turn out to be incredibly valuable. So, there are a lot of websites, they have a search function that's really terrible and you just use Google, but it could be that now that we have AI, they'll have a search function that's a lot better than Google. Could turn out that they're just sitting on a gold mine of information with all this document repositories.
Yeah, and actually, let me add on to that. You had a previous person, Eric O'Connor, and he was talking about custom GPTs. And so that's to kind of go with where we are and what we offer is that kind of thing, is putting that custom GPT in front of the data. And that's one way to keep that data valuable, keeping it from getting it muddied and keeping it from being in that wider model.
For sure. As I think back, as associations have looked at all of these different emerging technologies over the years, in the late 90s and 2000s, everything was, oh, we have that valuable information that's been vetted by our physicians, our engineers, our whatever the industry is, and you have to pay to get access to that, right? Like that was members only. That's how we did things. And then we structured that information. We've continued to build on that information, right? Whatever that domain is over time. And then it became, well, everything's out on the internet, everything's public. So let's make our information public, right? Like there was that whole discussion in our industries of like, what's protected, what's not. Now we have to show value by giving away more than we did before. And I think to your point, Chris, there's a huge opportunity of going back and saying, yes, ChatGPT can do what X, or Perplexity can go find stuff for you on the internet. But what is the value? The value for the associations, again, it kind of has come full circle for me to look, we are the experts, right? We are the experts in whatever domain. And not only do we have the vetted content, but we have a model and information that can get to you quickly. And again, I know that there's another customer we work with that's working with something similar to what you guys are talking about here. And they even have their members say, well, if it comes back with something that you don't agree with, let us know, and then we can tweak the model. And they can do that so quickly. And what I get concerned about is there could potentially be other competitors that can get to market quicker with similar content. I mean, they can go and find a group of whatever subject matter experts, start creating content and those types of things. So anyways, there is that member value, but I do think it's a huge opportunity. And Kelly, any additional thoughts that you have on that?
Yeah. So the ways that associations can maximize that value of the data. So our AI solution, Onyx AI, we are focusing on making that data available to their members, right? But keeping that restricted and keeping that expert certification of knowledge that associations have, and they remain that because their associations are constantly growing their data and growing their research, and it's always there. There's always publications. A lot of the AI right now has been like, how can I fix my staff and make it more efficient? And we're focusing on, here's something that you can offer to your members. And it allows them to get the right data they need quickly and efficiently. And I mentioned again, because I really like the podcast you had with Eric. He was saying, there's a lot of ways to get information now. How can you trust that data? And so what we offer is something that's only for your members and only on your data so that you can trust it. And not only that, we show with a citation to the document where it came from, how we found that answer. So for an example, we have a client and their user was using our tool and they'd spend an hour and a half searching for some specific documents they needed in their existing library management, knowledge management system. They only found 5 of the documents. It took them an hour and a half. So they tried our assistant and they were like, oh, I have this assistant, our AI solution from Onyx AI. And in 5 minutes, they got the information on the topic and 12 documents were cited. So 5 plus an additional 7 in 5 minutes. So right there, you have an immediate gain of 85 minutes, right? That's saved your time and you've gotten the answer you needed. So you make your research faster, you make your grant writing faster, you make it disseminating knowledge if you're trying to pull together for a webinar, if you're on the job and you need that information. So it's time and frustration saved, and it makes your members happier, makes them more engaged, and they're getting more out of that authoritative information that they count on associations for.
Yeah, that's great. Chris, so I have a question for you. What do you think are some of the most exciting AI innovations, like DeepSeek AI, or, I don't know, what do you think is the most exciting out there today? And how do you think that could, kind of shape the future of associations?
Yeah, so things are moving very quickly right now. And so whatever I say is probably going to be dated to early 2025. That said, I think I think one of the interesting areas is what's called reasoning models, which I said kind of back at the beginning, that what they call the foundational model, which is where it just given a sentence, say more words that sound right. That model doesn't really reason. It gives you the most frequently occurring answer to that kind of question. But reasoning is where you go back and you say, well, wait a minute, this sounds right, but it's not consistent with that other thing that I said. So So what it does is it generates its own internal monologue. So if you actually have to stop and think about something, you might, whether verbal or not, you might just kind of, generate some ideas. You might brainstorm or whatever. And once it emits enough of these things, and then you can now train it to try to find things that are inconsistent with each other, and then pick one and ignore them. So the next step in this evolution is to not only say things that sound right, which are internally consistent, at least if you have a wrong answer, it's not embarrassingly wrong, the way some of the models are. And I think that's a step in the right direction, because as humans, it's not that we never say anything wrong. It's that sooner or later we're going to realize it. I say dumb things every once in a while, but the difference between me and the model is I just said something really dumb. Wait a minute. Let me go back and correct that, or undo it, or clarify. That might get them over the hump to be more useful and reliable on certain tasks, because at least if you give it a low level task, and if it's reliable enough at being consistent with itself, it might actually be something where you can just give it a job and let it go. And the other direction that they're going in is what's called agentic. Agentic just means it does something. It generates a wall of text, and then within that text, there might be some JSON encoded data. JSON's just a kind of a universal format for nested data structures. And if there's some other program just looks at what it is, and if it sees a JSON, it parses it and it pulls out some data, and that might tell it to go do something. That's where they start being interesting, but that's also where they start being potentially kind of dangerous. So in high frequency trading, there have been these flash crashes where the trading algorithms will kind of get in a loop, and then within a couple of milliseconds they'll lose millions of dollars with some kind of derivatives. And so for what it's worth, I don't think most agentic AIs are going to be at the wheel of anything quite as dangerous as that. So if you're afraid of AI doing a lot of damage, well, we've had high frequency trading for several years now, and that's been able to do several $1 million worth of damage in a couple of minutes. I'm not too worried about that.
For associations, right? I know it can be very scary, and they hear things like that and like, how are we going to let it do that? But at the same time, if you have a smaller targeted implementation of something, even when it gets to reasoning or an agentic AI, maybe something specific, maybe to help them just get through their certifications, or, get additional units, and it be a better way to do that, and maybe take time off of that, right? Then that could also be internally for staff for that. Can I automate something? Process automation is a big thing that I know a lot of associations are moving forward. So I think that's where you're really going to see that kind of stuff. And I think one of the things that Chris and I have been talking about is it's going to get cheaper as well, because you've got competition. So that's also good for associations.
Yeah.
But their outlay is maybe not be as much as it was even a year ago, or even 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Because you have these models that are getting cheaper to run.
Yeah. So talking about that, I'd love to hear kind of your guys' take on, I don't know if we had a magic 8-ball, or if you can a lens to the future. What are your predictions on AI trends and automation and emerging opportunities? So I'd love to hear from both of you on that topic.
I would say that a lot of search is going to move to AI, because natural language search, like asking casual questions, it even happens right now in Google, right? You write like, how do I do this? Or how do I do that? We used to have to be, well, you type that and all in capitals, and then you put the asterisk, and it has to have that information in it. But instead now you're just, you're asking these questions casually, instead of searching for a bunch of documents and reading through all of Nick's answer, you're just going to get your answer. So I think a lot of search, Google's already doing that with their Gemini, and the first thing they show is that. And I think we're just going to move to that. And it's just going to be easier to find and get answers, even for those of us who grew up in the age of, hey, it's just Google it. Now it's just like, oh, just ask the AI and you'll get an answer. Translating is going to become quicker and easier for those associations that have worldwide members, a lot of time and a lot of money, to do translations. And it makes it so much easier. Even in our tool, we didn't even realize that we could just get a Tagalog, which I love, because it's most people don't speak that. And I'm like, hey, let's see if it can convert to Tagalog. And it did. And I was like, hey, that's awesome. And then the advancements that are coming with AI for images and video and audio, it's just going to make it easier and cheaper for associations to respond to their members, provide more value to their members by, maybe quicker video responses, quicker audio. And it also allows them to respond to the changes in the industry and the market as much as they, a lot quicker and easier maybe than they did before. That's what I see.
The models are now the most expensive that they're ever going to be again. We're going to see a lot of uses that would have been prohibitively expensive in the past. It has different strengths than a person. So models have breadth that's already vastly superhuman. I don't think I've ever read 10,000 papers in my life. I've read a lot of papers. I don't know if I've read 10,000. With these models, I can, in fact, I created a tool like this for my own use. So in our development test set, I just downloaded a bunch of AI research papers, and whenever I make changes to the product, I test it there. But I also actually use that sometimes. If there's something I want to know, I look it up there. But the strength of the model is that they have this inhuman breadth or superhuman breadth. But they don't have the depth. And so the heavy lifting that they can do is it's kind of like putting a huge net in the ocean. They can trawl for, miles and miles of ocean. They pull back a bunch of things. And then the fisherman's job is going to be to look at what's in the net and say, okay, those are tin cans, throw that out. That's bycatch, and then decide what the prize is. I think that there will probably be a lot of surprisingly mundane jobs that you wouldn't think of as being very important, but you have to do them, and the AI can probably just take that off your plate and make it a lot easier.
I love the fisherman analogy.
Yeah.
With people that are scared, when Chris came up with it, I was like, that's amazing. I love this analogy. I'm going to steal it and use it all the time, because even with the big, what are they, large fisheries, you still have to have somebody there picking stuff out.
Yeah. Yeah. So you guys, this has been such a valuable conversation. I could talk to you guys all day long, but for our listeners, we'll wrap up. But before we do, I'd love for each of you to share just a piece of practical advice that an association leader looking to implement AI effectively can do.
I would say that they need to really vet their partners, right? It can be difficult to find a good partner because there's a lot of hype right now, and there's a lot of venture capital money going around. So you can fall flat with an implementation. We just saw a major institution, their internal library deployment just completely was not great, right? And this is a huge institution. It was slow. It didn't cite references. It doesn't provide good answers. So, a lot of times, especially with associations, they may not know, if it's good or bad, if it looks flashy, right? So you'll need somebody who's got actual real world experience, with somebody who has AI experience as part of their team, and real world experience with that to help you get a good purchase that's going to make sense for your organization. And then to start with a smaller targeted solution instead of trying to solve everything. So for example, you could use it just for a specific textbook or manual, and provide that information so people can get that information easier. So I would say start targeted and really find somebody who's going to be a partnership with you.
That's great. Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
Working in AI, like I said at the beginning, you get into this mindset of here's a score function, just make that as high as possible. The better thing is to first think about what is the business function that I actually want to accomplish. And that is exactly what association executives can do. So they can just sit down and think okay, what does my association do? What do I need to have done? What is it blocking? What am I spending a lot of my time on? What am I not getting done because I'm spending all this time? And then, the next step is say, imagine if you have a toddler with a huge vocabulary. If I've got an 8-year-old kid that I want to hire who's really, really smart, what are the jobs that I can give to the 8-year-old kid, and maybe have somebody check their work. In a couple of years it'll be like a 12-year-old kid or something like that. I think there almost certainly are tasks like this, and so the association executives are the ones who know their organizations really well. I think there's a lot of killer app ideas waiting to be found, and they're the ones who are going to know what that is.
Absolutely. So Kelly, Chris, thank you so much for sharing your expertise today. This conversation, I think, really highlighted why AI really isn't an option. It's here. It's imperative for associations looking to stay competitive and deliver great member value to their members. So, and for our listeners, if anybody wants to get in contact with you or learn more, how can they do that?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Kelly Lakas, Lakas. And Onyx Point Systems is wherever social media may be found. It's on LinkedIn is Onyx Point Systems, all one word. Instagram, Onyx Point Systems, Facebook, We have a TikTok, but it's very small in there. Or you can contact us at info@onyxpointsystems.com. onyxpointsystems.com is our website. So,
well, perfect. So that's great. So I appreciate your guys' time, and to our audience, thanks again for tuning in. And if you found this discussion insightful, be sure to subscribe to Association 4.0 on your favorite podcast platform and share this episode with your colleagues. And let's continue the conversation about the future of AI and associations. So until next time, keep innovating and embracing the digital future.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and discovered tips and information that will add value to your leadership style and your association. .org Source specializes in positioning teams for success with solutions for technology, strategy, and marketing. Please contact us at info@orgsource.com or visit www.orgsource.com to find out how to keep your organization on track to Association 4.0.